it's Build-A-Bear, that one, who knows? But before we jump into watching the film,
Mm-hmm.
Danny, let's just kind of break down how each of us, right now, before we watch, how each of us feels about IVF.
IBF. Okay. Why don't you go first?
Sure. So IVF, my viewpoint has changed in the past couple years on IVF. Now, I know that people from the pro-choice, pro-abortion side always bring up IVF, and it's like, well, why don't you oppose abortion? Why don't you oppose IVF in the same way you oppose abortion? And I'm like, well, that's actually a valid point, considering that the way that we in modern society do IVF is that we have a couple, they're trying to make a child, they do through in vitro fertilization, which is, of course, the acronym for IVF, and they usually end up creating a plethora, an excess of embryos. And the excess from this embryos, usually they want 1 or 2 kids, and then they end up creating 10, and the excess are usually either frozen for what they call embryo adoption, or they're simply discarded. Now, being pro-life advocates ourselves, we advocate that life begins at conception, and so because these are embryos, that these are lives that they're throwing away, and as such, then even though the desire for IVF is not, it's different from abortion, because the desire for IVF,
trying to create life.
It's trying to create life, but
not
in creating life, it shows a flippancy towards life. And that's my biggest pitfall and downfall of IVF. If we could legislate, as much as we don't like using the government that much, if we could legislate saying that when we're using IVF, when we're moving towards IVF, that we're trying to only create the number of embryos that we're going to use. If we're trying to make 1 kid, we make 1 embryo. Then I would be much more supportive of IVF. But I'll break down how you feel, and then we'll watch this video before we have a massive panic of people.
When it comes to IVF, I feel like it suffers from the exact same problem that happened with birth control. Birth control was a good idea. And initially, the idea of birth control was to basically give married women the ability to choose not only when to have children, so like married couples, but also how many children that they could have. The problem is that birth control eventually became pretty much the vehicle. It's like a Pandora's box. It became a vehicle for basically having sex anytime, as many times as you want, for as many, like unending sex without consequences. And the consequences of that have been disastrous for society, for families, for abortion and everything else. I think the same problem with IVF is IVF began as basically an attempt to be able to help people who are infertile, like people who cannot have children, to try to find a way to help them to have children in a different manner. Like basically, you try to artificially create an embryo, and then you try to put it into a surrogate mother, so that basically a childless couple can have a baby. The problem now is that this has become the trendy way of having children, and then people will not only they'll get married without any intention of having their own kids, and they'll just go straight to IVF. A lot of lesbian and gay couples will use IVF as a way of circumventing the fact that they can't have children. Even to the point, the other day I watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and then Rose's parents were all well, we want to have children. It's like, I can have children both ways. I'm like, no, you can't. You have to be given children through IVF. So basically, they've created a monster that initially was a good idea and probably had good intentions and all that. But as we are wanting to do, we take something that initially was meant for good and turn it for evil. Hence why there's pictures of footballs that the army has tried to weaponize into bombs. So I mean, we always try to abuse something good and turn it and use it for evil. So IVF, I think, is becoming a bit of a monster. We've created a bit of a monster, and I think it's out of control.
Yep, it is 100%. So now that we've kind of given an opening take on this, let's watch Build-A-Baby.
Build
We'll
baby.
see how that goes.
Probably not well.
So we'll full screen it. All right, let's watch.
Welcome to Build a Baby, where anyone who wants a baby can build one. Something broken? Missing an ingredient or two? In our state-of-the-art facility, using state-of-the-art technology, we can build your state-of-the-art baby. Starting with the swimmers. If you've got a sperm producer, you'll be quite comfortable in our semen collection room, where you'll find everything you need to perform the task at hand.
Ugh. Yep.
No sperm producer? No problem. Build your baby with our extensive donor sperm bank, where all our donors meet the highest human standards.
Of course.
Now, on to the eggs. As with the sperm, if you're missing an egg carrier, you'll have full access to our egg donation bank, all gathered from top specimens. But if you do have an egg carrier, we'll pump that sucker full of hormones, so you can get as many eggs as possible in the shortest amount of time. And then the true magic begins. Building a baby in a petri dish. Truly a miracle. All embryos will be graded, and we'll discard any defective or genetically imperfect babies before you even know it. Building a baby shouldn't make you feel guilty. Congratulations! You're the proud parents of multiple embryos. Now all that's left is the womb. Are you a womb carrier? Get ready to party. No womb? No worries. Our womb rental managers will find the perfect match for your baby building. At long last, the day has come. Embryo transfer day. Cross your fingers that an embryo will stick, and you'll get that one perfect baby. Or 2, or 3, or 8.
You could be a
Not to
rabbit.
worry. Selective reduction will take care of that.
Ugh.
Wondering what happens to your Build-A-Babies that we don't transfer? For a small fee, we'll store them in our top-of-the-line cryogenic freezers. Ready for you to try again, or discard, or donate, or give to science. A beautiful gift. But whatever happens, Build-A-Baby is happy to help you again, and again, and again, no matter the cost. Contact us and build your baby today.
It's like mad scientist, like on Rogue, like on steroids.
Yeah, that is
Pretty much what it is.
Definitely like that video. Okay. Watching the video, like it starts off and you're like, "Oh, this is actually like trying to be
Humorous.
fairly humorous."
Yes, they
And
are.
then
They're
it's like,
going for humor.
"Oh, yeah, we're just squishing kids."
Mhm.
But in reality, it's actually what they're doing. It's just presenting it in a manner which is actually relatable. It's like, "Yep, no, we're gonna build your baby for you," because everything about IVF and everything about surrogacy is presented in this wondrous, very, very flashy, very attractive way. But then when you actually go under the surface of what IVF and what surrogacy is, you realize, oh, like, this is killing the majority of human beings created. And like, yes, when I look at, like, when they highlight it's like, oh, the baby that doesn't have an eye. It's like, yes, we'll get rid of that. Well, there is a factor that while, like, when we actually look at the factors and the percentages and the rates of miscarriages, the majority of miscarriages are for genetic defects. The problem is that we're creating this. The system is not perfect. And because the system is not perfect, there are going to be a far higher rate of genetic defects. And so we are going to be creating in effect, I don't want to say defective people, but that's in effect what we're doing.
We're going to create anomalies that we basically want to purge. Like, it's basically like, I just watched Guardians 3, and in that movie, like the bad guy, the big bad guy, the high evolutionary, that's what he does. He plays with genetics, and he treats life like it's like some kind of a flippant thing that he can, like, stamp out any moment. Like one of the most terrifying scenes in the movie is that he basically annihilates an entire planet worth of like creatures that he created because, like, well, it wasn't perfect, so I'm going to get rid of it. And I mean, we're basically
100%.
getting into the place right now with IBF where we're playing God. Like we're basically
like
we're playing
that,
God. Yeah, that's what
and
we're
like
doing.
carbonated water put it actually fairly well, and that the video, it kind of subtly hints towards the idea of eugenics. And kind of pursuing this perfect society. And when we're pursuing the perfect society, like, yes, right now, the only place which we're pursuing the perfect society is in IVF. But then you think of films like Gattaca. And in Gattaca, you have those who were genetically modified. They're the only children who, then they're the only people and the only citizens which have any value and any worth. And our society, like, you look at Finland. Finland made this post, and it's like, oh my
Iceland,
gosh. Oh, sorry, Iceland. Sorry.
Iceland.
My bad. I have slandered you, Finland. Please accept my apology.
Don't worry. They're hot on the trail.
They're pretty bad. They're pretty bad. So,
Okay,
Finland, we're coming for you too. Shame. But they put out a post. It's like, yes, we've eliminated 90% of all Down syndrome. Well, you didn't eliminate it because you've helped these people adapt into normal society. You've helped them to fulfilled lives. No, you've killed them all.
You purged them.
You've purged them from existence.
But it's okay because they weren't really human. They were only potential humans, Stephen.
Well, and that's how IVF. That's how in this film and generally the IVF business treats embryos. It's like, oh no. Like they are. It's like the abortion industry. They talk about the embryos as products of conception. They don't talk about them as human beings. They don't talk about them as living people. They are simply. They simply strap a scientific or a semi-pseudo-scientific term onto it and then hope that people won't look closer into what's going on.
I mean, really, when you think about it, I mean, every society that's dehumanized human beings has always come up with euphemisms for what they are. Like, they never actually called like African-American slaves, people. They call them I don't know, like all sorts of derogatory names, but they never called them human. They definitely never referred to them
and
human.
Of
Jews,
course, if
Jews were never human. Nothing. So the fact that they basically have to convince themselves that these living creatures are actually human beings, that they're at the most initial state of development. Because look at how they talked about it. They talked about the eggs, and what they're doing is they're basically creating a whole bunch, as many as humanly possible. Why? Because it's the most efficient way, but it's also the way that you're basically creating like dozens of potential embryos, and then you're like, oh, this one works. What do we do with the other ones? Well, they're now commodities. It's like we have all these cheeseburgers. What do we do with the cheeseburgers? Oh, we'll feed one to the dog and we'll throw one out, and then
we'll give one to science.
We'll give one to science and all that. Like you're giving human beings. These are human beings that you're basically doing. If you are an actual consistent person, if you're philosophically consistent as a pro-lifer, then you have to accept that when the second the sperm and the egg fuse, that is now a human being, and as a result, like ethics would demand that you have to treat that with the dignity that you would treat a human being, because it's just the earliest the earliest developmental level of human beings. That is a human being that will eventually become. Now, there's a difference between something that dies despite our efforts and something that intentionally destroy or kill.
Yes.
Yeah? There's a difference between a dog that got out of the house and got run over by a car, and
one you put down with a shotgun,
and one that you basically run over with your own car,
or you torture.
Very big difference. Yeah, there's a very big difference, and the problem is these people, because they treat these embryos as if they're just like pieces of living tissue, like bacteria or something like that. They don't treat them with any dignity, and this is the problem.
Well, and another element to this. Like, I think back, and I don't know if Laura was kind of trying to make this comparison, but when I watched this video, it was like, oh yes, like you can do this, and it doesn't matter at what cost. It's treating human beings as something you can purchase.
Yeah,
and it actually made me think back to the 2015, I know this is a scandalous thing to say, 2015 Planned Parenthood baby parts scandal. It happened. They were talking about selling human parts for scientific research, for whatever they desired, because they saw human beings only as a commodity and only as a dollar sign at how much they could profit from it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, yes, Planned Parenthood is like that, but the IVF industry is like that too.
Well, the IVF industry is like that, but they have kind of like more of a cover of we're the good ones. We're the ones that are trying to make but we're trying to make a better society, a utopian society where we've eliminated all of these negative things. And by the way, you're basically Sparta. Welcome back to Sparta. We are Sparta. This is Sparta.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're doing. They're basically saying, oh, this baby has Down syndrome. Don't worry, we can just take our finger.
We can
and
remove that.
it. Oh, this baby has this genetic anomaly, a cough or whatever. We'll kill that. But the problem is that when, like, one of the things that makes that shows the true love and humanity of human beings is how we treat those who are truly vulnerable.
Yeah.
And anybody can see video on Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube of somebody doing some amazing thing to love or care for somebody with Down syndrome, or somebody with fetal alcohol syndrome, or somebody who's like who has, like, missing legs or whatever. Like, we look at that and we're like, oh, that's amazing. Look how they're taken care. Look how much love they're being given. Did you ever see the movie, Stephen? Oh, it's about that boy with a disfigured face. It was I don't remember the name of the movie. It was Jennifer Aniston and Owen Wilson were the parents and all that. But it's I think it's on Netflix. Anyways, the movie was based on a boy who had a really obvious disfigurement on his face, and the movie basically, like, obviously he's very self-conscious and all that. The movie ends with everyone seeing that this boy, even though he had an obvious disfigurement in his face, that he's actually a really amazing person, and they all, like, completely fell in love with who he is and what an amazing kid he is. The deformity did not define who he was. And people, I've talked to people who've seen that movie, and they're like, that is so, like, it is so touching. We want to basically, like, take a kid like that and be like, well, you know what? We're going to kill him before he has a chance to actually, like, live, and before we have a chance to even see his personality and all the things that he would end up becoming. There's a real dark, almost like a real dark element of human experience, where we feel like we want to eliminate the negatives from life. We would love a society that does not value anything that is less than perfect. And by the way, anytime any society tries to build a perfect society that you eliminate suffering or pain,
end up doing the
or
same
anything.
thing.
It's utopian visions of a perfect society only ever play out in TV and movies. They never play out in real life. It is far darker. It is far worse.
Yeah, Carbonated Water says the movie was called The Mask.
I can look it up right now while we're talking.
Okay. Well, that's an old film, 1985.
That's really old. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's.
It was a recent movie. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this is, like, I don't know if I learned anything new exactly about IVF.
The movie's called Wonder, in case anybody's wondering.
Oh, okay.
Wonder. It's a great movie. I recommend it if anybody has not seen it. Wonder, it's a great movie.
Okay, good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Danny is filled with movie suggestions, so.
I really am. I've seen a lot of movies.
You've seen a lot of movies, that is true. Anyways, so last little tidbit about this film, and then we'll move on. Did you learn anything about IVF?
Anything new?
Anything new?
Let me think.
Because, like, the way that this film is presented, it's like those of us who have done even a little bit of research into IVF, this kind of just confirmed a lot of the things which we've been saying before.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, the procedure, when you watch the procedure, there was nothing that you could, like, I remember my quote was cited a few times. and I'll quote it once more just because it was just a wondrous quote. There was nothing you could do but watch in abject horror. Whereas this one, you're kind of just like, oh, well, that's sort of humorous. Oh, that's dark.
Yeah.
Whereas,
Well,
like, I'm sure, and what the point of this one is because so many people in modern society have a positive view of IVF.
yes.
And so this is going to, it's like, oh, like, this is how IVF works. Oh, really? That's how IVF, yes, that's how IVF works. And that's exactly what they were going for.
Yeah.
And, like, well done. It does the job.
I think what the so with the procedure, what Choice42 does is it tries to go one way. It says, I want to demonstrate how brutal this is by using a medium that normally that's probably the best medium to be able to demonstrate it in a way that you can see it without like the horrific reality of it. So like an animated short can do that better than like seeing an actual procedure like that in real life. If you actually saw the procedure like that in real life, it would be like beyond horrifying, right? But the animation kind of softens it. With this one, what they did was really brilliant. What they did is they approached it by trying to mock and trying to like poke holes in a humorous way and try to like basically expose the flaws of IVF by using humor and by using basically satire to pretty much poke holes in something that people thought was like, like, oh, beyond reproach. It's a pretty brilliant move because what happens normally is we just talk about these things and everyone just has the assumption that, oh, IVF is so great. And we hear all the positive stories about people having children and all that. And what they do is they present it in a way, in a very disarming way, by using humor to disarm people, to make them think, huh, I didn't realize that was happening. It's a pretty brilliant move because Babylon Bee does it all the time.
They do.
They use sarcasm, they use humor as a way. And mockery is one of the most powerful tools that you can use to basically to break the illusion that something is like beyond reproach. And I think that's why this approach to use humor, mockery, and satire is a very effective one. I think that this is going to work for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.